Yeah,
Okay.
share.
Let's try. Okay. Right. Okay. So thank you so much. It's brilliant to see so many people from all around the world. I'm really excited to be here. I just thought I'd start off by maybe giving you a little bit of background into what, you know, why I'm talking about this and where I've come from. Just give me a second and I'll bring up what I've got to see. Wow. I can't. Okay, so here we are. So what have I done before? Well, I was actually teaching at the British Council in Seoul in South Korea, probably about 12 years ago now. And that was the first time for me working with children 4 to 5 years old, and the first time for me teaching through picture books. And now, as Melissa said, I run this Kids Club English website, and yeah, so on there, as she said, there are resources, I've got tips and support, and there's a teacher membership. But how did I go from there to now? Well, so I moved from South Korea to Spain, and I started teaching extracurricular courses in a local state school, and started off with teaching through picture books without using course books. So that involved a lot of course design, materials development, and I had to do a lot of thinking. And one thing I was really thinking about from my experience was how to kind of get more language going on in my lessons with picture books, because sort of what I'd observed and with working with other teachers as well is that the children, apart from all the other benefits of teaching through picture books, which we'll look at in a moment, it tended to be focused on quite isolated vocabulary items. So I was trying to think about how to get more language going on. So that's where I'm at. So I can say who's here in terms of what countries you're from. That's brilliant. From the pre-course survey, thank you to those of you who've completed that. This was one of the questions. So how often do you use picture books in your lessons? And these were the results from yesterday. It's changed slightly, but not so much in terms of the percentages. So very happy to see a lot of people use picture books very often, and there's no nevers, which is fantastic. How about here? If you use picture books in your lessons, yeah, great. I can see some sometimes, often. Just write in the chat, sometimes, often, never, always. Great, often, sometimes. Okay, that's almost never, right? Okay, well, hopefully by the end of this, we might have less of the sometimes and more of the often. So let's move on. Okay, so the benefits of using picture books. So if you could just complete that sentence, how would you do that? Stories help children do what? Create imagination, yeah, visualize, become creative, learn better, understand internally. Yeah, these are all really great answers. And yeah, lateral thinking, that's a good one. Make connections, yes. Yeah, brilliant answers. So I think these kind of match up with some of the things I've got here. Enjoy their English lessons. That was actually 100% of the people that completed the survey said this. And I think for me, that's key as well. They're enjoyable and help foster that kind of positive attitude towards English and also like books and getting that enthusiasm for reading, I think. Develop 21st century skills, helps them talk about their feelings, sharing opinions and experiences, helps them understand language and remember language and use language. So these last ones about language, this is what I'm going to kind of focus on more on today, because I kind of feel like this is where we could kind of do a little bit better sometimes. Okay, so the objective really is to explore practical ideas and strategies for maximising language learning from picture books in BYL and YL classrooms. And these are the things I hope that you can take away from today's session. So I hope that you'll feel more confident in identifying appropriate language goals. And I'm going to give you some ideas and procedures that you can immediately use in your own lessons. And I'll briefly give you a kind of working framework to plan a series of lessons around a picture book. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, first, we're going to take a closer look at what our language objectives are, or what they could be. And then we'll briefly consider what is required for successful language acquisition to take place and how that applies in our storytelling lessons. Okay, and then we'll look at these activities and strategies we can use and how they fit into the lesson. Okay, so first of all, the language learning objectives. So when I asked this question in the survey as well, how do you start? How do you decide on your language learning objectives? A lot of people wrote a topic and the subject, and I think, you know, that was great. A lot of people talked about other things, but I'm just going to broadly show you how I kind of divide this into kind of two different groups, so two different groups of objectives. So first of all, I think about what language I want the children to be able to learn. What do I mean by learn? Well, I mean that I'm going to have an explicit focus on that language. So I'll need to create a need for them to either understand that language or produce that language in order to complete a task. Okay, so people would call that your target language, I suppose, as well. And then I have this other set of objectives. So this is language to acquire. With that language, I'm thinking more of an implicit focus. So in other words, I'm not really, what I'm asking the children to do, they don't need to understand the entire sentence or the entire structure in order to complete the task and to participate. But this language I'm going to integrate into my teacher talk and into the procedures I use in the crafts and the songs and the games. So while I might not be expecting the children to use that language, I'm basically trying not to restrict my language too much to just that explicitly focused stuff. Because, you know, we know that children, they're all learning at different stages of development, and some children will be ready to kind of understand or start producing that kind of bigger language, where other learners won't be. But I think the key is that we've really got to just make it available so that some, even if they're not getting it completely, we're familiarizing students with that, so that if they've heard it, when it comes to more formal study down the line, it's going to be more easy for them to be able to acquire that language and start using it. Okay, so I have these two different sets of objectives. So we're just going to look here at one. Well, these are some examples from a book, Monkey Puzzle. Can you just write in the chat if you know this book, Monkey Puzzle by Julia Donaldson and Axel Scheffler? Just write yes or no. No's and some yeses. Okay. Well, there's quite a few no's there. So the basic idea is that there's a monkey, a baby monkey, and he's lost his mum. And this butterfly comes along, very nice, friendly butterfly, and says it's going to help the monkey find his mum. And the butterfly takes him to these different animals through the story. So, you know, is this your mum? No, that's not my mum. That's an elephant. You know, and the butterfly takes him to another animal and so on until eventually the monkey is reunited. It's a really nice story. So these are some examples of language that you could focus on. I want you to then decide if you would give this an explicit focus or an implicit focus. So thinking about the objectives and dividing. So these words, so monkey, butterfly, elephant, would that be an explicit focus or implicit? Just X or M? Sorry. X, yep, lots of X's, some M's. Okay, how about this? No, that's not my mum. Okay. A bit of a mix here. Yep. Okay. My mum has got a tail. Both there. Yeah. X. Okay. Tusks, claws, beak. Okay. My mum can jump. Right. Lots of X's for that one. Okay. Here it is. It's here. Implicit, explicit. Okay, lots of M's with that one. Okay. Where's the snake? All right. And the final one here. I know, come with me. Okay, lots of M's there. Right. So yes, you're kind of confirming what I'm thinking here. It really depends, doesn't it? It depends on who you're teaching and where they are at and their kind of stage of language development, because you might have that as an explicit focus or an implicit focus, depending, right? So how do you decide? So these are the questions I ask myself. So if it's an explicit language objective, I'm thinking about, you know, do I want to help them understand it or produce it? You know, so if it's either of those, then that's going to be an explicit language objective. If I want it to be, I'm thinking about implicit language objectives. I'm thinking about if it's language that's worth acquiring, because sometimes with picture books, I mean, there's so much in there, and that's one of the great things about working with it, that it's so rich, but it might be language that's not that frequent, or it's not that useful. So that might not be worth acquiring at that stage, perhaps. And I'll be thinking about if I can include repetition of that language in either the storytelling itself or in the activities I use around it. And if I can, then that might become an implicit language objective. So just looking back at those, so these ones, the highlighted ones, are vocabulary. If they're very low level learners, I might just be focusing on monkey, butterfly, elephant. But that doesn't mean that I won't use the words tusks, claws, and beak, even if that's not my explicit focus, because, you know, there might be learners in there that, you know, they might know this. Does anyone, any of your kids, are they into Pokemon? It's very popular in Spain. Yes, yes. Okay. So yeah, like I've had this a lot of times where I've come language that I might have thought was perhaps too complex or infrequent, or I might not have, you know, included it, and they've been like, oh yeah, oh that's that Pokemon, you know. So like the children that know that Pokemon card would be ready to acquire the word tusk, and by including it in our lesson, they've been able to make that connection. So it would be an implicit focus, perhaps, or it could, if you were doing, perhaps you're doing science, natural sciences, and that might be an explicit focus. Okay, it depends. So this one, I know, come with me. Again, how are you going to use it? So if I wanted the children to use those phrases, I could be getting them to join in the storytelling itself, and I could, you know, be getting them to repeat with me. I could be integrating that language into, you know, the different activities I do so that they're understanding and producing it. Or I might just be using the language and letting them hear it, but not ask them to do anything, in which case it would be an implicit focus. Okay, these ones, if you've been studying has got or can in your classes, it's something they've seen before, perhaps they've seen in other contexts, well, this might be an explicit focus for you. You want to help them understand or produce this language. If you're not doing that, well, then it would be implicit. Okay, so yeah, basically thinking about how much they know already and where they are at in their language development, and started to become more intentional in choosing the language that you're going to focus on or you're going to try and integrate. Okay, right. So I'm just going to show you another question I asked in the pre-course survey that a lot of people said, do you adapt the words of the story? Now, this is another whole other topic, and there'll be people that say that you should never adapt the words. Well, I'm kind of the other camp, and I do adapt the words, partly because I'm trying to get in this implicit language. So this is an extract from Monkey Puzzle. So we just look at some of that there. So I might adapt that to my mum has got a beak. So I'm just move this around my screen a little bit. Okay. Or she's got a nose. So trying to get in the changing mums for she's there. And doesn't have claws or feathery wings. I could change that to she can't fly. My mum can jump. You know, so I might be wanting to help them acquire can and can't, but that might be an implicit focus for me. Okay. Right. So I've got my objectives. Now what? So it's time to select activities. So I wonder in the chat, like what decision, what do you think of when you select activities? What are good? What goes through your mind when you're selecting activities? What are the important factors? If you could write some of those. Yeah, colorful. Interaction time setup. Yeah, very practical. What learners need, the level. Yes. Taking turns. Okay, so think about group dynamics there. Cooperation. Yes. The length. Yeah. Imagination, achieving the aims. Yes. Okay, so many things, aren't there, that we've got to take into account? Yeah. Okay, well, this kind of marries up with what a lot of second language acquisition factors, what they think are necessary for successful language acquisition to take place. We have to kind of consider that there's meaningful repetition, so that we're including within our activities contextualized language, so the language is contextualized, and that it's repeated, that you're not just including it once or twice, that the children need to hear it several times. That it's memorable and enjoyable, so that we are creating but we're connecting with the children's emotions as well, and that we're creating memorable experiences. That there's variety, so variety in the different types of activities. So a lot of related points there mentioned in the chat, that you're thinking about different dynamics, you're thinking about what will appeal to different learners, and you're making sure that there's a variety of ways in which that language is being presented or used or practiced. And yeah, you're giving them play opportunities. So yeah, I think quite often that is one thing that we can often not ignore, but perhaps we're not giving the children enough chance to just try out the language themselves, especially with young learners, because there's so much focus on exposure. Yep. Okay. So if we move on to this, so what do I want them to practice and how? So the practice part, I'm thinking much more about my explicit objectives, and the how part, I'm thinking a lot about my implicit objectives and the language I want to give them exposure to. Okay, so I think it helps to have a bank of tools, basically a bank of activities, and I group them into these different categories. So if I'm wanting them to understand the language, I'm basically using teacher-led activities that are listen and respond type activities. If I'm wanting them to produce the language, I'm thinking about more teacher-guided activities. And if I'm wanting them to experiment or play with the language a bit more, I'm thinking more about child-led experimentation activities. So what we're going to do now is move on and look at examples of these that we can take into class. Okay, so teacher-led listen and respond activities. A lot of, you said in the survey as well, I imagine, like, so we're thinking about games, drama, TPR, so total physical response, activities, songs, crafts. Which one of those do you think you use the most in terms of a listen and respond activity in the chat? Which ones do you use the most? Songs, games, yeah, lots of games, songs. Okay, some crafts. Yeah, this is interesting. Good. Fantastic. I'd love to see your classes. I really would. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, slightly less then for drama. And a lot less for crafts, actually. And this is where I want to kind of maybe convince you that actually crafts are really useful tools for this type of activity too. Oh, but let's look at games first of all. So typical games, splat games. What am I talking about with splat games? Just games where your typical kind of flashcard type games where they're listening and understanding and pointing to something. And there's different formats we can use for that. So these are a few. So round the room, those are flashcards from We're Going on a Bear Hunt, where you'd maybe have the kids in a circle and then you say something, then they go to point to the flashcard. It could be a board slam, where this is projected onto the board, or you've got flashcards on the board. Perhaps you play a team game, and again, they listen, they understand, they point to the correct animal. Circle slam, so you could have the children are sitting in a circle, and maybe two of the students have something, or it could just be their finger, but they could have something to listen, understand, and hit the correct thing. Splat mats, all that really is a lot of pictures on an A4 bit of paper, but that means that they can work in pairs doing that rather than it being a whole class activity. Out of those that are there, could you just write A, B, or C, or all of them, if you use those type of activities in your classes? So board slam, all of them, yeah. A, B, all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think these are all quite familiar, aren't they? That's good. Okay, so we've got those. Those are in our kind of toolkit. Yes, that's a good point, Stephanie, about how active you want the children to be. Think about the energy in the classroom. Yeah. Okay, well, moving on to some other games now. These are some other games that are listen and respond activities. So fishing, where, I mean, I've made my own fishing rods just with a magnet, and then on the flashcards, a paper clip. So the children could listen, and they have to kind of fish the correct flashcard. You can buy fishing rods as well, though. Bingo is another typical one, and they're listening and then doing something there, and categorizing tasks where they're moving cards or moving something into categories. Out of those ones, which ones do you use? A, B, C? B, yeah. Okay. Yeah, bingo's quite a popular one, isn't it? Categorizing, good. Yeah, it's really great to see so many C's in there. Categorizing tasks are brilliant ones to do, and it's something I want to kind of include more, because you're getting kids to use their higher order thinking skills. You know, they're having to kind of make decisions and solve problems. And a big benefit of those is that you can have kids working in small groups. So the potential problem with some of these teacher-led activities is you're trying to capture the children's attention all the time, which is tiring for the children and it's tiring for you with these kind of categorizing tasks. You know, the teacher would say, in that picture there, we've got, those are cars from Go Away Big Green Monster, but you could be saying, you know, Big Green Monster has got teeth, and they would listen to that, understand, and put all the ones with teeth into one group. Big Green Monster has got blue eyes. And then, of course, you can get the children to decide on their own categories, to organize them themselves. And the important thing there is your teacher talk, your monitoring, so that you're giving them exposure to those longer structures. And in fact, I think that's the key with all of these games, even thinking about the Splat games. So from that monkey puzzle book we looked at, you know, we don't want to be just saying elephant. So they're only listening and understanding to our kind of explicit word there, elephant. We're also using that bigger language, and that depends on what your implicit objective is. So it might be just quite simply, you know, no, that's not my mum, that's an elephant. And then they go to the elephant, but they're hearing the whole thing. Or you might be focusing on has got, like, you know, it has got a long trunk, it has got 4 legs, it's an elephant, and then they go to the elephant. Okay, but just making sure that in these listen respond activities, you're getting in the exposure to that kind of bigger language. Yeah, fishing is fun, it's true. Okay, the drama TPR games, I'm sure these will be very familiar to you as well. So musical statues, again with monkey puzzle, you could be using that language. So yeah, it can jump, and it has 4 legs, it's green, and they might start jumping like frogs. And then, or you could ask them for it. It's the ones that are ready to produce that language will say frog, the ones that aren't will have heard it another time. Movement mingles. So yeah, you could be using that same language, but you know, giving them the bigger language, and allowing the child to respond with the animal, and then they move around and stop another animal. With musical statues and movement mingles, I should say, you know, it's obviously easy when we're talking about animals to act like an animal, but you know, it can be interesting. Maybe not with your very youngest learners, but they can still move and interpret other things. How would you interpret grass or a river, for example? You know, you could still get them to do these kind of activities. And of course, story retelling. And I was happy to see that this was a very popular one in the pre-course survey as well, because the pre-webinar survey, sorry. Yeah, so retelling the stories through drama as a way to kind of give them exposure and help them understand. Songs. So yeah, we've got our kind of implicit objectives or explicit objectives. It's difficult to find a song that's going to like really kind of get all of that in one song, right? But we can adapt the songs. I'm really sorry, I'm going to give you a quick song. So there's a typical one, right? Frère Jacques. So it could be, you know, it can jump, it can jump, it can't fly, it can't fly. Is this your mom? Is this your mom? No, that's a frog. No, that's a frog. Okay, you get the idea. So Frère Jacques has a really well-known song, I think, and it's quite good for introducing the language that we want them to be able to hear and understand. What other songs do you know that you could use and adapt to suit your language objectives? You could type them in the chat. Any other popular songs? It might, you know, you might have other songs, and unfortunately I only know the like English ones in English, but I'm sure in many languages, anything that the children are familiar with is good to do this. Baby Shark, get one little finger, yes. Yeah. So it's great to choose songs that the children are already familiar with the melody, then they're not having to remember the melody as well. I hope you're seeing some, you're following the chat, everybody. There's some great suggestions there if you're happy. Some of the ones I've used are like, she'll be coming round the mountain when she comes, London Bridge, yeah. What other ones not mentioned there yet? Jimmy Crack Corn. There's a couple I think I put on the handout, so yeah, wonder if I can add those ones in. Great. Okay, so I'm just moving this out of the way, sorry, just so I can see. So we've got crafts. Okay, so as I said, this is the one that a lot of people perhaps don't really see as much potential in. And actually, this is something I found to be really useful. So I want to kind of, it's not necessarily obvious because a lot of people might see like craft as kind of the bit you do after the story and there's not really that much language practice going on. But in my classrooms, it's kind of a key bit to be able to get in more meaningful repetition of the language. So yes, you might not call that a craft, right? Color dictations. I use the word craft in a very broad sense. So a lot of people, if I've said in the title, paper-based crafts, I'm really thinking about anything that the children are doing with their hands, okay? And with a color dictation, the key is, again, like we've said before with these kind of listen and point games or the fishing game, you're using that bigger language that you want them to be able to acquire. So it's not, you know, snake, color the snake. It's, you know, either using the story language, you know, no, 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 that's not my mum. Come with me. Ah, no, that's a snake. You know, what, until they get the word snake, or simply, it hasn't got any legs. What animal is it? But you're trying to use the bigger language. So yes, that's what I'm saying there. Don't forget implicit language objectives. Okay. So these are some typical ones. So these kind of find and stick scenes. Okay, so where you've got these different parts where they're sticking them in a scene. So you find a lot of those type of things anywhere. Marionette type crafts, where you've got different pieces they put together. These are mini books. You'll see there's different templates. So sometimes maybe they're matching a picture to text, or they could be matching text to pictures. So again, with these ones, I tend to conduct them as a kind of a treasure hunt type activity. So I'll pre-cut the pieces, and I can do it in different ways. So you can have them all jumbled up together in an area of the classroom, or you could have them jumbled up in different areas of the classroom, or you could have them kind of grouped by same thing set. So it could be, if it's the body parts there, it could be all the legs together or all the tails together. And you would again be using that language for the children to listen, understand, go to collect the piece and take it back and stick it in their craft. Okay, so let's move on here. Okay, yeah, so a cut and paste element. Basically, what we're trying to do is, or what I'm trying to do, is pretty much putting obstacles in the way. And so you're trying to create a need for the children to kind of listen, hear that bigger language, and then respond to it. So you're not just giving them everything and letting them kind of, you know, put it together themselves. Then we're moving on to kind of teacher guided activities. Okay. And so first of all, we'll look at like whole class activities. Oh, I'm just looking at the time. We'll need to rush on here. Sorry. So opportunities for production. So the guessing games. The child is a teacher in Splat games. Okay. So almost anything there. The child, nominating the child to collect and color. Almost anything that we've done with the teacher taking the key role, the children can do it. So if you're trying to get them to produce the language. Then we've got small group game activities, because there's some things which are more suitable in small groups. So these are some of my favorites. Pelmanism, rock, paper, scissors game, and board games. Okay, and again, the key is that you've demonstrated this in well, so then they would be, I'm just noticing Fatima, you'd demonstrate it and then they would work around, and then your job as a teacher is to go around and monitor and kind of feed in that bigger language to them there. But they're taking the role in producing the language that time. Group discussion. Well, that is actually coming up. It depends on how guided or how free you want it to be. But I'll just come to that in a second. I've just got really speed up now, sorry. So same thing, find and stick. I was going to ask you this in the chat, but I'm just going to run through it. They don't have to listen and respond. They can also ask you for the language. So then it turns into a productive kind of task. So they might say, you know, can I have the snake, please? Or, you know, the snake, that's not the mum, that's the snake. Okay. Board games. So again, you can combine these stages. So they might first listen and listen in order to collect the animal, create their board game, and then play it. Dice and graphing sheets. So this is where they roll the dice. They say the language that you're guiding them to say, and they color in a square, and they can play this in teams or in groups. You'll find more ideas for those type of things on my website. Dialogues. So this is coming back to what you'd mentioned. So with discussion, if you might want them to be practicing a dialogue, they can do that with rock, paper, scissors, and just a simple pair activity. Or another one is doing a mingle, having them mingle around, stop, and then they talk to each other, their nearest partner. Another setup is this one, where you might have an inner circle and an outer circle. So they move and they meet a new partner. And this is where I have the crafts I find to be useful tools. So they might have the mini book there, for example, and be choosing an animal and then playing a guessing game with the person that's there. So, it could, on the most simple level, is it a snake? No, it isn't. Is it an elephant? Yes, it is. Okay, the freer activities. So role play. Drama play, yeah, so getting to dramatize a story, maybe giving them some puppets. Story retelling, they can do that in groups. Learning station, so that's where you maybe have different areas in the classroom, and perhaps in one area you might have the picture book itself, another area you might have some of the crafts they might have made, another area you might have flashcards they've made, another area puppets, and you let them move around and play basically, and experiment and watch what they're doing. Because remember, you've kind of demonstrated what they can do through your other type of activities. Now they might use some of that in those situations. Write and draw, so they might draw their favorite animal or invent a different ending to the story. Draw. So you're seeing what they can do without you. So this is your opportunity to kind of monitor, see what they're kind of picking up and using spontaneously, and seeing perhaps where the language gaps are and things you might want to come back to. Very quickly, so across lessons, probably quite obvious. So you're going from teacher-led type activities to more child-led activities. But you're trying to include a mix in each lesson if possible, right? So they're not going to be 100% teacher-led, and they're not going to be 100% child-led. But if they're at the very beginning and you're introducing that language and they need to understand it, it's going to be majority teacher-led, but you're going to still give them opportunities to use that language if they're able. So in a lesson format, we've got these type of things, perhaps before the story. The storytelling itself, which you can use in different formats, not just from the picture book. And then post-story, you might have those activities, and that's usually where the craft would be. Not obviously all in one lesson. You'd pick and choose different tools for each part. Over a series of lessons, if I had 8 lessons with one picture book, this is how I would do it. So lessons 1 to 3 mainly, but not 100%, listen and respond. Then 4 to 5 teacher guided, and then lessons 6 to 8 moving to more child-led freer experimentation. But you may be thinking 8 lessons is a lot. It works, but I've had classes where I only see them once a week. Now we'll typically use the same book over maybe 3 or 4 lessons. That doesn't mean that I just get stuck in listen and respond activities. It might be that I have to, like, I'll include in the first lesson mainly listen and respond type activities, and then on the second one I'll move into more teacher guided experimentation. But the teacher talk and that kind of interaction with the children becomes even more important. You're giving them opportunities to produce the language. So perhaps they're asking you for a snake picture. They might just be pointing to it, and you could be, it's a snake, or can I have a snake, please? The child might say, like, they might try and say it, they might not. You could then say snake, please. They might try to produce snake, please. If they don't, you could say snake. They might say it, they might not. The point that you're not forcing them, but you're giving them the exposure to the language, and then you give them the piece. Okay. So thank you. I'm sorry I've kind of rushed through that. I'm not sure if we've got much time for questions, but yeah, there's more information on the website there, and yeah.
Yeah, we do have time for questions, Fiona. Don't worry too much. So let's take a look at all the questions that are there. Thank you so much for everything.
Up there.
Had a really good time, I can tell, and I especially enjoyed the singing. That was great.
Amazing what you do in a kids class, isn't it?
Yeah, it reminds me. I teach adults and at university now, and I wish I could go back to the kids' classroom to do all the activities that.
Oh, it's really good fun. But I think the thing is that we often have to be quite flexible because you're reacting to the children. So it's quite useful to have these sort of different tools that you can kind of be quite flexible with.
Yeah, no, it sounded all great, but there's lots of questions coming in, so let's take a look at what's in the Q&A. Oh, I want to start with one from Liz Burkett. She says, what activity is your favorite and why, Fiona? Great question.
Oh, I don't know. It's too difficult. I tell you, okay, with the very young learners, so I'm talking like kind of 3 and 4-year-olds, I'll tend to do some kind of, I'll use those listen and respond games and the pointing games where they're moving around the classroom a lot. I'll use songs a lot. And with terms of the craft, I'll tend to do kind of a jigsaws actually, but it's basically it's a coloring dictation, but then they have something they make out of it afterwards. So I didn't actually have an example there. Or I'll do one of those cut and paste type activities because that's simple. With the older children that can produce more, I'll tend to move straight to kind of things like mini books and yeah, like, and games they can make, like fortune tellers and things like that, because they're at the stage where they're able to produce more afterwards, so they've got something that they actually do with it. So it's a time saver for the teacher because it fills so many different stages of the lesson, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I used to love mini books actually. I remember one child said, teacher, are you obsessed with mini books? It was really fun. If anyone needs to know how to make a one-page mini book, there's lots of good YouTube videos.
Yeah, I've got some videos on that as well, actually.
Great. An interesting question from Luca Rogallo. And Luca asks, could a storytelling activity be influenced or be inspired by a photo that children see in class? I guess it's kind of improvised storytelling.
Definitely, that's something I don't have a lot of experience with, just like oral storytelling without the book. I've done a little bit of it, but yeah, definitely. And in some ways, it's a different type of activity, but it's really engaging. Like, and the children's focus is different. It's much more the focuses on the storyteller and joining in with the actions and things. But yeah, being influenced by a photo, yeah, that's a great idea.
A good way to start, and it's the same thing. It's using visuals, and then
yeah, and if you're using their first language too, I mean, getting the children involved in the creation of the story. So, you know, they see the picture and then what happens next, and you kind of build it up. So you're reformulating what they're saying and dramatizing. Yeah.
that can be great. Um, Emma Pasco asks, she says she really needs some ideas for large groups. And she says she's got large numbers of bored children with lots of energy. Which activities work with big groups, Fiona?
I admit I don't have huge amounts of experience with large groups. Like my largest groups have basically have only really been 14, I think, with that age group, and I find that too much. It's me on my own without other language assistants. You know, but songs, plenty of like songs. I think like doing songs where you're kind of your routine is so important, but you know, you're doing something I find match their energy. Look to how you can kind of match their energy. So meet them where they are. So quite often doing something active like some of the super simple song stuff like walking or whatever, where they're doing something that's communal, although they're still in their own heads, and then bringing them into a kind of make a circle song, settling down and using finger play, like a lot of finger play songs. And that's those are really good. And thinking, well, after that they need to move. So then you're maybe kind of doing like listen and point type activities. And then they might be ready to sit down and listen to the story. And then moving into kind of a craft type activity. And I think with that age group, it's going to be really, they're not going to be sitting, listening quietly to hear what you say, to then sit and color something. They're, so that's where you let them kind of like do their own thing with the craft or but your interaction language is the most important. So basically, I think it's challenging with a large nursery group with large children because you're monitoring and interacting with the children and using the language and giving them exposure in that way. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah. No, I think that will help. So you've got, I suppose, not movement with playing one set of cards between groups, but actually the songs movement, they could be standing beside their desks and still doing the actions and still listening.
Yeah. Using that kind of splat mat things that they can kind of touch and move around, but things where they maybe, like I've seen like a lot of teachers using like they've created a kind of a box with just a cardboard box with a kind of a slit in the mouth, and they've made a face. I wish I could show you. I did an interview in my membership with a fantastic teacher on this, but she, the children would listen and then, you know, they feed the box. So that's kind of another listen and respond one that really appeals to the younger age groups. So they listen. They've got a flashcard,
Come
and
up
then they
and
put it into the box. They feed the monster or the bear or the whatever animal it is.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds really fun. So the box is decorated and it looks like a character.
Yeah, and another tip which I got from this teacher, Nerida, who's amazing, but she put like put Velcro on a cardboard box, and then you can have pieces. So you could like you make eyes, and then you can stick them on, and you could change them. You could change ears. You could have, you know, a different type of mouth, different type of nose. Those kind of things.
Wow, teachers are artists, right? Teachers are really creative with these
Yeah.
things. Ishwara says in the chat, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, I definitely, definitely. If you have any more questions, put them in the chat for us. We'll keep going through the ones that we've got. There's a question from Flora Yip. And she has said, is it time consuming to do drama activities, and how do you cope with that? Maybe some teachers are under pressure.
I think that a lot of people misinterpret drama to mean a big production. So it depends. Obviously, if you're preparing for a big production, it can take time, but children aren't going to, you don't want to kill the interest. So if you are if you're building up to something like that, I think the key is like a little bit every lesson, you know, and often. But I mean, drama, you mean that could be just moving around the classroom, like imagining you're wearing high heel shoes, or like you're, you know, you're the tallest person in the world, or what. That's a drama activity, and that doesn't really require a lot of time. That's quite a nice kind of brain break as well.
Yeah, so it could just be a few minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, true, and or built into other activities, and maybe it's worth the time as well, from the
Definitely.
interest.
I mean, children need to move. And I think one mistake I've made, though, I'll say when I first started teaching like younger kids, is like I interpreted that as like, oh, they need to move, so all needs to be like up here energy levels, you know, like, oh, it's all running and moving around and dancing. And think about in your context where the kids, how are they coming to you? Because in my case, they're coming after a whole day of like school and high energy stuff, and they need some settle time too. So there's lots of movement you can do in a settled way where they're just, you know, even that categorizing game where they're sort of sitting down and they're having a chance to move things around, they're getting to move. Well, they're not having to like run around all over the place, you know, or they're doing like finger play songs or like puppets. See, I'm starting to do songs now, but you know, all of this, that's movement too, and not to forget about these settled type of activities.
Yeah, true. We think of movement as, yeah, legs and running, but
Yeah.
actually movement is other things as well. Um, I did I think of a question of my own, which was how do you contain excitement? But I guess it's like that, like not all the lesson has these huge
Mm.
activities. It
Yeah,
must
I mean,
be down.
I match when I match kind of the stages of my lesson, basically thinking about energy levels. So I kind of go sort of stir, settle, stir, but a little bit, you know, and then there might be another settle, then there might be a more bigger stir, and then, you know, um, I mean, I can't go through it all here, but I mean, I think about those kind of stages and how you're wanting the children to kind of transition and helping them, because it's not, it's a bit of a shock if someone's like saying to us, but I think to children too, like, okay, everyone, now it's time to do it. Like, just think about how you're going to go from this kind of like, you know, big energy and transfer into and transition into kind of a quieter energy. So yeah, and that's
Yeah,
where songs I think are quite useful.
yeah, okay. So they get people's attention. You don't have to shout and make everyone sit down.
No, go quieter and thinking about your own body movement, because children will, you know, they'll look to you. So being aware of that is like, okay, well, if you want them to kind of like settle down and be quiet, you settle down and be quiet. Like one way I get their attention if I'm coming into the classroom and they're moving around, like I'll put on a song in the background, but no video stimulation or anything, like a walking song. And I just kind of you know, get them to gather around and they'll come around, and then we'll start kind of acting the song together. And then we'll end up going into this make a circle scenario. So they've come in sort of individual high energies to kind of come in a bit quieter, doing something that's active, but we're doing it as a group, and then kind of moving into kind of a quieter area. But yeah.
That's nice, and it's a way to use the songs again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Let's take one last question, which is interesting. It's from Zainab, and Zainab's question is, which of these activities would be best for online English teaching with very young learners? Which personally, I don't have that much experience of, but I know that
No.
lots of people are doing that.
Unfortunately, neither do I. But I am. I'm not really very helpful in that respect. But I do know that a lot of teachers have done things like craft, but online. Now it depends on what the situation is. Like I know teachers that have, you know, sent to parents like to print out, and that's, you know, it sounds like quite a lot of work to me. But there are a lot of things that you can get them to do just with like bits of paper or a mini whiteboard, and you can do that. Songs, they basically work, you know, anyway. You can still get them to do drama game, and there's so many opportunities because they're in their house. So like if you're doing a kind of, okay, right, find something yellow, or find something, maybe you're doing you know, what's the word, like properties with something soft or something hard. They've got things at their fingertips, you know.
Yeah.
So I think there's still a lot of that kind of listen, respond that you can do as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, everyone, it's come to 1:15, so we're going to have to say goodbye to Fiona now. But we are going to have a 15-minute break, and then after the break, we'll be talking with Stella Pallavicino in Argentina about the polar bear's pin and EFL phonics story. So yeah, go back to going to have a cup of coffee and then come back. Thanks
Yeah.
so much, Fiona. It was
Thank
really
you so much. It's been great, and really great like seeing you all here. So thank you.
great. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.